I'm struggling with the term racial reconciliation because when I look at what's happened, it's a history, hundreds of years, going back to the 1600s, of white people oppressing minorities, starting, any minority in this country. There's just a history of that. So it's a group of people that have historically oppressed minorities, African Americans, and so on. And so, and then we've got a group of, sometimes white people that say, hey, we need to come together. It's like, and reconcile. But reconciliation almost gives this idea of like the two coming together, when really I've been struggling with that, because it's like justice, racial justice needs to happen before reconciliation. Because you got a group of people over here that oppression has happened to them. It's not like, well, we oppressed you and then you oppressed us. It's like they've only been on the recipient end of that. So it's almost like racial justice needs to happen before we can even have the racial reconciliation conversation. Do you feel what I'm saying? It's
Absolutely.
like, how does a dominant culture, say to another culture, hey, we've oppressed you for hundreds of years, but let's reconcile. It's like, what do we have? I can just imagine, an African American go, what do I have to reconcile to? It's been done to me. Justice needs to happen.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Absolutely. I think this is key, because I think that sometimes we want to jump to the easy, let's just hold hands, and we're all one in the body of Christ, and what's past is past. And what you're, I think, articulating and getting at is the hard work of pursuing justice. It's not a one-time thing of, okay, the past is past and it's done. It's not even a one-time thing of forgive us. It's really an ongoing process, an ongoing conversation.
We can't just have a conference and go, all right, we're
Done.
good, we sang Kumbaya.
Exactly. No, and so I think part of leaning into that process of justice are some practices that we as the church, as the evangelical church, have either avoided or not really steeped ourselves into. Practices like lament, practices like confession, corporate confession. So I have a friend here in Chicago, Daniel Hill, who's a pastor, and as a way to help protest the murder of Laquan McDonald that happened here in the city, a number of faith leaders came together, and Daniel, who is a white pastor here in Chicago, led the prayer time for that time of lament, and he actually prayed a prayer of confession, confessing on behalf of his white brothers and sisters, the white complicity in some of the injustices that have happened in Chicago and beyond. Daniel got lambasted. The kind of feedback and the kind of vitriol that he had to weather and receive after that confession was enormous. And it shows we still have a long way to go before we can even say we've reached the place of justice. We actually have other work to do still. Of just understanding the issues, of acknowledging that there are issues, of being willing to own our corporate involvement as the church in those issues. So it's hard work, and I think it's one of those ongoing processes where this side of heaven, we may never fully be there, but at the same time, we can't stop pursuing that goal. And reconciliation, I don't think, is a one and done thing, and it won't be likely. But there can be progress in the church if we're willing to continue to have the hard conversations, the uncomfortable conversations, like what you're getting at here, are pushing at some of those kinds of deeper issues, but we're not having enough of those conversations in the church. So I appreciate that you're asking, I think, really critical questions. These are questions that in the church we have to continue to bring up and be willing to address.